and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Now, live from Chicago, the Hal Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
Hal Sparks, actor, comedian, and multimedia personality.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hal Sparks.
All right, let's do this.
Welcome to the show, everybody. We live on the upside of a hole. That's pretty much true of everyone on Earth right now. 2020 was a deep crevice that we all fell into, and coming out of the other side of it, you can feel like you've done a lot of climbing, and yet just be at ground level. You know what I mean? That's the essence of having been in a physical hole, much less an economic hole, psychologically. If it's a lot of work getting from depression to just average, you know what I mean? That's psychologically for people. And the same is true across a lot of different fronts. We have made a lot of progress in the last, 2 years in the fight against COVID, and a lot of progress continues to be made, and yet we are still reaching what is effectively ground level as far as nationwide health and all that. And one of the things that has always been a bit of a bugaboo as far as the nature of numbering the COVID deaths in the United States is how many people actually died from it versus how many people died from it plus something else, the comorbidity factor. Now, I'm of the belief that if you had all these comorbidities and that was the thing that killed you because you were walking around with those comorbidities relatively fine, considering your long-term lifespan might be affected, but your acute lifespan wasn't going anywhere. You weren't going to die in the next 2 years or the next 3 years without
just waiting for something like COVID to come along.
Yeah, something to tip you over the edge. You know what I mean? Yes, you're a mess, but it was a relatively common mess in the United States, and you'd have hung on for another decade and a half or so, and more than likely because of the age range of people with those kind of comorbidities, you either were previously disabled, meaning you never worked, or you were going to work right up to the time you keeled over. That's how most of the time those kind of levels of comorbidities work in the United States, anyways. And then
Hal Vickery hitting us with $2019.
Oh, look at that. Remember those days? Remember 2019? Thank you so much, Hal Vickery. So the question ends up being and everybody's asking where my space shuttle backdrop is. No, I'm back in the saddle again. We're back at the regular studio, which is so relaxing for me compared to being on the road. I've gotten so comfortable in this little hovel. I feel like I'm in, in a hyperbaric chamber or something. Like I'm just surrounded by 3 screens. This must be how gamers feel. Anyways, so the death rate in the United States, depending on who you listen to, has been undercounted somewhere between 7% and 30%, depending on who you ask, because of the statistical death rate of COVID itself before we got a vaccine, and the measurable difference between the unvaccinated and the vaccinated, and how certain states wanted to downplay it. And we had a president who told Bob Woodward at the time that he always wants to downplay it, and they were fudging those numbers all over the place. And meanwhile, even though our numbers are undercounted somewhere between 7 and 30%, especially in the first year, now that we have more honest numbers and we're counting lots of infections, and it's showing us a lot fewer deaths, a lot fewer hospitalizations due to...
Well, the vaccine is experimental.
Right. It's I don't understand. I don't want to it's going to change my DNA, and my DNA is perfect. So,
you know what? Roll the dice.
Yes. God don't make no trash, I think is the old David Cross line. So in the meantime, One of the things we've heard and the Olympics are coming up, they're going to start in a couple weeks, and everybody's kind of on the fence about this. Well, what we've heard is China has a zero COVID policy, and they have had, you know how many deaths they've had from COVID the entire time, Johnny
In
Million?
China, I bet zero. I bet nothing.
4,823, something like that. 4,000.
Oh, that's
in a country,
handy.
Yeah, in a country of 1.4 billion people.
Mm-hmm. That sounds
I don't
accurate.
know.
And none of them pure poop.
Huh? Yes, none of
And
them.
none of them pure poop, and they all shoot one hole in one.
That's right.
Games
That's
and,
right. It's amazing. Yep.
They invented the hamburger.
Yeah, they're all tall enough to be able to step over a hurdle without even stretching, and they're all short enough to walk under a door frame without bumping their head. And they all have a 6-foot wingspan, and all the things that are impossible are possible. Well, it turns out that while we've been undercounting our number somewhere between 7 and 30%, turns out China has been undercounting their number, and this is kind of fun leading up to the Olympics, by somewhere in the order of 18,000%, and that the minimum number of dead that they have is closer to 1.7 million. And that is baseline. That is the absolute bare minimum, how many you're going to lose just by stacking all factors that are and close proximity in a highly contagious disease, especially during the Delta wave, which was, even more virulent as far as who it took out. This is based, I think, on alpha numbers. And this is one of the things that, we've been ice skating uphill against other countries. Like, there's this point of pride about how many cases and deaths you have is indicative of somehow how your government is handling it, instead of how many people you have, how close they are, big cities versus small cities, the chance of interaction with someone who's got the contagion. And it's one of the reasons why the infection rate in the United States is such that, let me see if I can bring this up so that people at home can actually look at this, that the currently new COVID infections are declining in the United States, and the doctors believe that the Omicron wave has peaked and is on its way down. Now, is that the same for everywhere? Is that the same for New York versus Iowa, for example? And the answer is no, it isn't. And that's the problem that the CDC and the NIH have in talking about these numbers, is that we don't believe science, we don't believe in vaccines, we don't need this stuff, it's not really a problem, is the kind of thing that creates an extra problem if you live that way when it finally hits. Because yes, there's a delay. If it starts in the highly populous areas, because there's a higher chance that someone with a South African variant is going to fly to New York or Washington, D.C., or Miami, or Los Angeles, or Seattle, or something, than flying to Des Moines or Minneapolis. And so what's going to happen is they land in Chicago, they give it to someone, a couple of weeks later that it trickles in such a way that somebody drives up to Minneapolis, and then you have the break. So what we're seeing right now in these numbers is like the numbers in Rhode Island and in New York. And New York's numbers are down 247 per 100K. Like, that's great. Minnesota's is up plus 127. That's the issue in these situations. North Dakota's up 103. Oklahoma, Kansas is up 105. Alaska is up. And this is because, and then all these other states, that are later to the game are up, 54, 8. In the case of Indiana, it's up 3 per 100,000. West Virginia's up 61. But no surprise, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, those are on their way down. Massachusetts, Connecticut, Delaware, D.C., Maryland, all these areas that are highly populated, Florida even, are on their way down because that's where it first hit. And so there's this follow wave. It's just like being in a stadium. The first people to throw up their arms, first arms to go down when you're doing the wave. And it's these people halfway across the stadium who are like, I wonder if it'll make it all. You've participated in the wave, have you not, Johnny Million?
Oh, my God, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and so
sometimes I'll do it on my own.
You ever seen it go around a few times?
I don't know.
When it goes around once and then it comes back around a second time, And then the third time you're like, I don't know how committed I am to this third run of this way.
That's why I was hesitating. I'm like, oh,
And
really?
yet,
I
right?
guess.
And yet, right? Somebody near you won't do it, but somebody near you will throw their arms up. And what does that do? That leads to somebody a couple of seats down throwing their arms up.
It makes me look like an a-hole.
Yeah, it does. It makes you look like you're you're not a good team fan or band fan or
good
whatever.
Team fan.
Yeah. So
you had it right.
This is what happens in these areas. This is what we're dealing with in terms of the spike in certain areas right now, is because they are on a delay from the impact, and that delay gives them the illusion of security, that they can drop their guard. Well, it's already passing because the news, almost all of it in America, is in New York City. So the first wave hits New York because it's the center of a lot of stuff. The news, because all the commentators, all the reporters, all the people who are the anchors are all coming and going with, Uber drivers and people at restaurants and all this stuff. And they're dealing with it first because they're on the front lines of this stuff. And so they react to it like you would if you were on the front lines of something. But the people in Des Moines aren't feeling it yet. The people in Minneapolis aren't feeling it yet. And so they kind of write it off. They're like, these people are overreacting. And they are if they were in Des Moines. If they were in that area, like local Des Moines news isn't acting like your national cable anchors are or your cable reporters are that are on the East Coast and they're affected by it earlier. And so by the time it gets to Minneapolis and Des Moines and these places, they've already gone, these people are, they're freaking out. It's not happening. And that's exactly when they let their guard down. And then you see this spike. And that's one of the other factors we've seen beyond vaccine hesitancy in those areas is strictly a factor of time scale, the location of America's news as a pinpoint, think of it as a marker in time. That what happens in New York is kind of a measure of noon and the clock of news. And as it ticks forward, you're over that story by the time it's reached noon where you are, because it happened before. And so that part of it has contributed to deaths in this country. It has absolutely contributed to people's feeling of vaccine hesitancy, and that's it. It's a minor factor, but that percentage is the extra percentage of deaths. It's also the extra percentage of uncounted deaths. We have to take a break. When we come back, we'll deal with a little bit more of that. The reason cases are arcing down, but deaths are on the rise is because we're climbing out of a hole, not climbing a mountain. So statistically, the number is askew, and that goes to economic numbers in a good way and in a bad way. We'll talk about that as well, because year-over-year inflation, watch for it next year. It's going to be amazingly low. Gee, I wonder why. We'll be back.
And I'm in the chat defending the wave and the Gatorade shower. I'm doing the people's work.
That's filth.
Attention, stop what you're doing. Because we're coming back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Oh my God!
They went a little crazy with it, and I appreciate it.
Now let's get back with Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I got him. I'd lost Johnny for a second. It was very exciting. It was a newsworthy moment.
You should have seen the angry face I had when he dialed me back.
Like, oh.
Like, oh, you.
Yeah. So right now,
center me.
Yes, right now, let's get back to where we were. This is a real story, because people out there in the radio world, they don't know, they don't care, they can't see all this craziness behind the scenes unless they go to infotainmentwars.com. We don't need the documents. We have the information. And twitch.tv/HalSparks. Don't forget to subscribe. It helps the show. It helps us be here. It's the only way we're here, actually. So no pressure. All right. So deaths are rising currently in the United States. Statistically, by percentage, but materially, they're low. This is like the stock market issue. the stock market had a terrible week, even though it stayed above its all-time record from last August that it stayed above for like that it would never reached before. You know, that's one of the
It's
things
almost
about
like everything's relative.
Right. Hey, now we're on to something. Now we might be talking about some. Okay. If you'll recall, Trump loves to brag about gas prices, especially when no one was going anywhere and oil was negative $35 a barrel. You'd think gas would be relatively cheap when, it's amazing how cheap things are when no one uses them or there's a lot of them laying around. You know what I mean? It's like the difference between selling dirt and fertilizer, right? Fertilizer's a little special. You might need it, and you got to make it, and it's a mixture of dirt and other stuff, and you want to, there's even good versions of fertilizer. We've been known to make our own, and yet dirt in and of it's like sand in and of itself, not so helpful. There's a lot of it around. You're trying to grow some plants. You're not going to get a premium for it, is all I'm saying. It's not going to be a high-priced commodity. And in this particular sense, if you're looking at these percentage differences, deaths are rising. This is from Axios's breakdown of these numbers. Deaths are rising in the United States, but the U.S. still has a lot of COVID. A reminder that even the milder variant is still a very real threat to unvaccinated Americans. Now, there is still Delta and wild type out there. And Omicron doesn't necessarily show up in some of the older tests. And also...
Delta and what type?
The wild type, the original.
I totally missed that variant. Oh, okay. That's like before Delta?
That's everything. That was the original COVID-19. There was an alpha variant, which is the first variant after the wild type. Wild type is what's...
That's the one that the hipsters got.
That's right. Yes, wild type. You break my Johnny Skype. Anyways, so there was alpha, there were several betas, there was the mu variant and other stuff like that. And then there was Delta, which was the big breakthrough one in August that was very dangerous, but didn't spread as quickly compared to, say, Omicron, which spreads very quickly, but is not killing as many people. But by the volume, because of how much it spreads, the concern is you get a volume of deaths from that just because there's more people getting it. And It is, again, a pandemic of the unvaccinated. This is clearly right now, like you're talking about 90, and we dealt, this is, again, the statistical fun part. We talk about on my live show weekly, daily sometimes, depending on who's lying about it, the lie of percentages without a baseline number to judge it by, right? Because if you have one thing happen, and it happens once, and then it happens twice, that's 100%. Oh my God, there's been 100% rise in this situation that happened twice in a town of 7 million people. So, like, percentages without that baseline number to judge is relatively worthless. And what you saw, come and go is one of the bigger, dumber lies. I mean, you can tell how dumb a lie is by how, if Don Jr. does a video about it, it's a dying talking point that will fail. Like, you just count on it. It's a matter, and the quicker he does it, the shorter it lasts. Like, he is the right-wing talking point, shark jump. That's it. Like, you can tell it has jumped the shark as soon. And if he makes it the same day, it's not going to last to the weekend. And in this particular case, there was this thing that 75% of the people who died of COVID had 4 or more comorbidities, right? That was the talking point. Did you hear that one when it came out, Johnny Million? It was all over Fox News.
No, but the chat seems to think that I've got a lot of pain and suffering, so we're getting a lot of super chat. So I want everybody to know that I'm fine. I'm plenty warm.
Yes, he was chilly. He had to pet his cat. He blew his nose.
That's right. And
he's fine.
The super chats trickle down. Hal is a very good man.
Yes, and he's, by the way, he's he may look like he's doing this show from the docks, but he's not. So it's an inside joke for the live stream. So, but it's important.
So I don't know. I didn't hear the original. There's 4 comorbidities.
It was everywhere. The 5 talked about it. Don, like I said, Don Jr. did a video. It was all over Daily Wire and all these things. 75%. Well, what it turned out to be was 75% of the vaccinated people that died of COVID during the Delta wave had 4 or more comorbidities. So even though they were vaccinated,
I bet you could make it sound worse.
Oh yeah, that was 36 people in total. That was the vaccinated people there were 36 people who were vaccinated who died in total. While tens of thousands of people are dying unvaccinated, 36 people were vaccinated, died, and of those, 75% of that 36%, those 36 people had 4 or more comorbidities. So there was they were ice skating uphill anyways, even the vaccine. And there's, by the way, there was nothing in this about when. Right. And they were over 80 years old. But there was also that was one of the comorbidities. Being that old is a comorbidity in the case of.
I suppose so.
Yeah. So, 27 people out of the people who died. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of Trump supporters who are stomping their feet and refusing to get vaccinated on purpose, and their tangential left-wing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Fans and fans of Wasp from the Ant-Man series, the 3 of those people are dying. Now, in all fairness, Evangeline Lilly is vaccinated. She's just supposedly against mandating it because I guess she falls into the kind of Fox News zone of, well, we don't have a mandate, just do it optionally. That way it kills off all the dumb people, right? We're trying to get rid of the MAGA group.
Does Evangeline Lilly have like libertarian leanings?
Yeah. That's, which is, it's easy to bootstrap when you're that hot and born into the industry. But anyways, what I'm saying is you've got, that's a statistical mess. That's where you're playing with that number. And the same thing is true with inflation. Inflation is up 7% compared to the crater of 2020. In 2021, it was up 7%, that for the year. If you compare it to 2019, it was up 5.2%. If you take out gas prices and the fluctuation in that, it's closer to 4%. Is it higher than you want? Yeah. But that still includes all the deaths. That's not the business part of it. That's just people who were working, who are no longer working, and not passing an item you want to buy from one person to another in the middle of that. So lowering that supply chain availability and therefore driving prices up an extra 1.5%. So what does that mean? It means it's artificially high in 2021, which means it's going to be artificially low in 2022. And all the people who are clamoring about it are going to drive us towards deflation and monkey with the entire economic system based on a false number from the year before. So the difference that people need to focus on is if you're crawling out of a hole, you're not climbing a mountain. And pretending you are is dangerous and foolish. And it's what gives us excess deaths in the Midwest and in the South and in the MAGA country. And it creates economic policy that pretends 2020 never happened. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this because I want to talk about some of the economic factors. And I also want to talk about Biden getting a little angry this week, and with good reason. Man. With good reason. We'll be back.